Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about doing this, having this opportunity to kind of go through time management. It's interesting because when I started talking to Nafis about what people are facing, I kind of had this visual come up for me. It's like when COVID hit, it just felt like we're all kind of just trying to keep the plates spinning in the air, and this is what life may feel like for you. Serena gave you a little bit of background on me. So just to kind of bring this to life for you a little bit, at the end of September or December, I actually quit my job of 9 years and started into this new world of entrepreneurship and startups. So right now, as I'm going through my time management skills, it's really starting to bring a lot of these things to life, because I have three different parts to my life that I manage constantly. So for those of you who feel like there's like never ending number of plates that you're spinning in the air, I empathize, I'm there with you. And so hopefully for the next, 55 minutes or so, we can get some of your stories. And I definitely want to get into some strategies that have worked for me, and also wanted to hear what has been working well for you. So I just wanted to kind of, first of all, kind of launch the poll. Let me see if I can get into this. So just take a second and answer the poll of, what are you finding hard to be working about in this COVID reality, just in terms of time management. Or work-life balance is really the ultimate goal that we've got. Awesome. That's great. So we've got a bit of everything. So it feels like a lot of people are struggling with, I don't know if you can all see it, but I'll just read out the results. So, you were allowed to kind of click on multiple things. Feels like everybody's got a little bit of everything, but the overwhelming one is definitely about distraction. So I wanna make sure that we talk about distraction a little bit and how to stay focused. One of the things that I feel really passionate about, just make sure that I can go back to my full screen, and I'll stop sharing this. Okay, now it's really tapping into my multiple things. There we go. All right, so obviously distraction is a bit of kind of what we're overwhelmed with right now. One of the things that I want to talk to you about is starting with intent. The second part that we'll go through is a little bit of how to plan. And I have something that I use called return on effort. And then third part that we'll go through is kind of quick hit. So, you've kind of done the intention, you've done the planning, things are still kind of coming at you quick and fast. What are some quick strategies that you can actually just remember throughout the day so that you are staying on track? And then at the end, I always like to end with gratitude for the day. So hopefully some of these that you're familiar with, and hopefully there's a couple that may be new and interesting for you. So at the very outset of the day, today was actually a really great example. I always find that Monday mornings are a bit of a challenge. And today was no exception. Coming out of the weekend, you're either kind of working through it or you're enjoying outside. Doesn't really matter where you're coming in through. I do find that Monday mornings tend to be a bit of a transition back. So today I actually did consciously think about what I wanted to get out of the day, knowing that I would have this opportunity with you guys to get into the session. And the key thing for me today was around energy. So really sharing my energy, getting energy from you. So again, like if you've got any thoughts or comments, feel free to post it in the chat. Feel free to do the reaction. That's something that was very intentional for me today. I feel like this gives you a really great backdrop to approaching the day in a way that is not random, that you're already setting the intent around what you want to get out of the day. So some examples that I definitely have tapped into in the past, I would say the last year and a half of my job, I really learned to do this very well, because it was getting to the point where I wanted to make sure that I was really focused on what to extract out of the day. So for those of us who have multiple hats to wear, and all of us are in that zone, when you start to think about, my day is around learning, or my day is around connection, all of a sudden what you're doing is priming your brain to extract the relevant bits out of the day, so that at the end of the day, when we end with gratitude, that you are able to almost play the highlight reel back. So it is actually pretty interesting how that works, and how our brain is looking for things that confirm what our intents are. What I would say is, if you're not currently doing this right now, start with one of these intents of the day examples. As you build over time, what you can do is start to connect it back to your life mission. So my life mission is really to help build future leaders with practical kind of leadership skills. So when I start to look at what I want to get out of the day, everything that I'm doing hopefully ladders back to that. But if you're just starting out, don't feel like you have to go there right away. I would use one of these ones that I've written down. And if none of these resonate for you, for sure, put in ones that are kind of exciting for you. But, if you're finding that you're much more motivated by challenge, maybe it's around like kind of achievement. So when we talk about challenge, you might want to set some examples up of, hey, I want to set some goals for myself today that is going to get there, but that it ties back to the intent of the day. And, the next part of it is really making sure that the intent is visible. Or if you're one of the people that loves kind of visuals, pick a picture that represents that word for you. I find also too, to have a totem or kind of a symbol that represents that for you as reminders throughout the day. And like I said, your brain actually, in a really kind of fascinating and great way, it looks for highlights during the day that ladders up to that intent. So if you're not doing that right now, I would say that as like the first easy thing for you to do, to set that intent in the beginning of the day so that you can plan for the rest of the day. So planning, depending on how much stuff you have going on, I like to do this. I did not do this week, so I am feeling a little bit out of sorts, but I usually do this Sunday when I plan for the next like week or two ahead. And what I start doing is start to look at where I want to focus and where I want to spend my energy. So those two things are both within kind of our control. A shout out to Dwayne Johnson, who's The Rock. Those of you who may know this guy. So what I approach the kind of the planning portion is really to think about three things. One is to start centralizing all the tasks and goals into one place. So again, those of you who have multiple hats and multiple roles, I would encourage you actually to put it all in one spot. And I know we all use different Trello boards and things like that. Again, you want to be able to prioritize your time because your time is limited. So no matter whether you're spending it on, your role that's as a parent, or your role as a entrepreneur, or your role as a board advisor on something else, they're all taking time from the same thing. So you still want to make sure you have a place where you're seeing all of these things play out so that you can trade off. The second part about it, this has probably been said 1,000 times, but it's because it works. Make sure your tasks and goals are smart. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But third is really prioritizing based on this idea of return on effort. So I'm going to kind of share with you the way that I like to do things. This is a snippet of actually my own personal goals, and make sure you're putting it in whatever tool you prefer. I'm still old school, so I have a paper planner. I also do use my calendar. I also do use my kind of reminders, but they all feed into this master list. If you love Trello, again, have different boards, but know at the end of the day, you're gonna have to centralize them at some point in time. If you have any other ones that work, I know there's lots of tools out there, so not gonna talk about tools per se, because I think everybody's got their own preference. In fact, I would love for you guys to share just in the chat group what you use and what you love to use. So very simply, you want to lay out your goals and tasks. And again, I would make sure that it's very specific, and you'll see, I'm gonna kind of tear this one apart a little bit. So you have a due date, and that's it. to begin with. We're going to kind of go further into it, but you'll see some of these are actually pretty big, right? So drafting a proposal, launching a website, these are not small things. Launch a program. These are not small things to do. So I've got more work to do where that's concerned. And that's where really SMART comes in. You want to make sure that there's specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, time bound. I think all of you know what that means, but what I wanted to make sure and be really clear about is when you have something that is a huge chunk like I had, where it was like launch a website or launch a program, you want to start adding in things like the time that's required to do that. And anything that is really over 3 or 4 hours, I would really challenge myself to start breaking them down into smaller chunks, and then to add those specific steps back into your master list. Because what that starts to do now is you can see where the milestones hit over the next week or two, then you can start to schedule them accordingly. So it's going to start morphing like this, where I've broken out things like the website. I've broken it out to 4 different steps. This one, the first one, probably needs to be a little bit further down even, because that's 4 hours. That's just on the high end of what I like to have. The reason why I have 4 hours is because you can actually maybe schedule that in fairly easily. I would honestly prefer it to be 1 or 2 hours so that you can start to really make sure that you are budgeting in the time for that. Then, so we're still not done, right? Because now we've got kind of this list of stuff, and you probably got a list similar, and it just looks like a dog's breakfast. Like, this is only 7 items. I think I have 20 right now. So you start to kind of, those of you who are kind of really keen planners in the world, you want to make sure that now you've got a way to dissect what goes first and what goes last, and how do you prioritize. So one thing that I really like to do when it gets a super complex is do a bit of thinking on something called return on effort. So all of you probably have seen the urgent versus kind of importance matrix. That's useful as well, but we've almost taken the urgency portion already out of it when we're looking at lists that are over the next week or two. That's already prioritized in terms of urgency. So the next level that I like to look at is what's the actual impact that you're going to get from doing this task, and how much effort is it going to require? So it's not dissimilar to the other quad that I was talking about in terms of the urgency and the importance. This is just a slightly different way to look at it, where I like to think about, am I going to get high impact or high effort, or low impact and high effort? So I'm going to go through each one of these. So if you've got something that is going to make a huge impact and it's going to take low effort, you do it now, because it's not going to take a lot of time, but it's going to make a huge importance. So that should be your first quad. Whatever you do, the green one is where you want to prioritize. The second place I would go is probably this idea of it's going to be high impact, but also high effort. And what I would do for that is actually to schedule time in the future so that you're blocking out time to do this. And in fact, you probably want to break it down, because if it's high effort, it means that you've got a lot of time sucked up in this that you want to break down into smaller chunks so that you can put some of them into the do it now quad. The one that you want to get rid of right away is this one, the low impact but high effort. So stuff that's not going to make a huge difference, but it's going to suck up a lot of time. Why are you doing it? This is a no-brainer that you should get rid of. The next one that takes a little bit of energy for you to think about is stuff that makes no impact, but is also no effort. So it might be things like that you just need to do. Like, these are the super kind of administrative things that, you know, maybe you want to like kind of clean your kitchen, or, you know, fold laundry. Like, super low impact on your life, but it's actually low effort as well. So you could choose to either delete it, delegate it, and you could actually do it now. I actually forgot to say that. But there's kind of different ways to approach it. So this one's probably the one that you need to gauge a little bit in terms of how much of an impact is low, whether it would actually make you feel better to get rid of it. So I just want to pause at this point to see if anybody's got any comments or questions at this point in time. How many of you have kind of a tool like this where you're going through different ways of allocating your time? I'm going to see if I can see your comments.
So Judy, Darren here. I've tried things like this before, but then I find I'm spending too much time prioritizing and creating these lists that it's taking away from actually executing on any of that.
Yeah, I actually did think about that yesterday because when I was going through it, my suggestion for you is don't get into the specifics too much because it's really attractive to do it that way. And I do have a version for that. So I create an Excel for you guys to use if you want. There's a link on my website that you can basically download this Excel and it should not take you more than honestly 5 minutes. Because you kind of know what that effort's going to be. And so don't get into the numbers per se if you can avoid it, but more like just marking it in terms of, I think it's in this quad. So I think for people who are numbers driven that really like a lot of specificity, this is one area that I wouldn't put as much numerical focus on it. I do have an Excel that allows you to do that if you're that way. But if you can avoid it, just almost like create this quad and just put things in it and go from gut to say, you know what, I think it's going to be like kind of hugely impactful, but try to avoid if you can the Excel version, even though I do have a version like that for you for people who like that. But yeah, really great point, because I actually started getting into the exact same while I was putting this together, it was kind of like I also love numbers. So I was starting to get really into the specifics of it. And I kind of went, no, you just got to do the quad. You just got to start bucketing them in really fast. So great point. Anybody else?
See some in the chat, Judy.
Okay. I can't actually see the chat. So if you
do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, please.
So Allison mentioned she does have a plan, but it goes awry when a new project comes to the table, and she doesn't always have a choice.
To take the project, you mean? Yeah. Then it's one of those things where you almost have to break it down and prioritize the parts that need to be done right now. So if you don't have a choice over it, it necessarily has to kick something else out. So you have to incorporate it back again, go back to step one, centralize it, and then see where it impacts everything else so that you can, again, like it's going to shift all the ways that you're allocating it.
Karen had a question.
Yep.
What if the tasks are low impact, high effort, but still need to be done at some point?
Why would they need to be done if they're low impact and high effort? I guess I would ask that question.
I'll add, I think sometimes, for example, you can't control what your bosses or your superiors ask for. And even though you may feel that it's a low impact and it's going to be a high effort, sometimes if people don't know or see how that's going to be done, that's part of it. I used to work in advertising, so all our time was tracked. Mm-hmm. So that was great. You could pull reports and you could see, and everyone kind of had an understanding of how certain projects would take. And in the university environment, time isn't tracked.
Yeah, I love that. I thank you for raising that. So a couple of things that I would do, because this is an assumption, right? Like we've basically ruled this based on what our perception of impact and effort is. So when you are running into you've got somebody asking you to do this, and I've been both on the receiving end as well as on the giving end. What I would do is, first of all, clarify why they think that it's higher impact. So in terms of where things are, you may have a different understanding of what low means. So I would ask more questions and probe around what that means in terms of low versus high. The other part that is also warranting some questions or conversation is around the effort that's required. I've definitely been on the receiving end of this. Is sometimes when somebody says to me, like, this is what's involved. Is this what you thought? And if now that you know it, what am I missing from an impact perspective that might make sense for this to still go ahead? And then the last part, if they agree that it's low impact and I have effort and they still want you to do it, is to actually make it really clear that something else is coming at this expense. So show them where things are at in terms of priority. So highlight the do it now and defer. And if they are basically saying, yeah, no, it's going to bump one of these things off, then let that be really clear for all of you. If you're all holding hands, that's the way to go forward. But I would make sure that before you even get to that point is to have some conversation around the level of impact and the level of effort that's required.
I think I'll just say there's a wonderful French expression that says, you know, la danse de la patronne. It's the dance with your boss. Because that's always sort of part of this is really just depending on who's looking at it and what their understanding is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get it. And all I can say with that is that it really is a negotiation. It really does need to be, you guys are fully aligned on the impact and the effort. So it becomes way more challenging for sure when you are dealing with another person, but it does require you to clarify what they think impact means and what they think effort means. Because sometimes when it's not them exerting the effort, they think, oh yeah, go ahead and do it. But when there's something at stake that you have to bump off, that's when it becomes really real. So I would for sure have that kind of discussion insofar as, you know, effort versus the impact. Hopefully that's helpful. But you're right, it gets super tricky when there's somebody else at stake. So Darren, like I said, if you like numbers, this is a way that I've kind of started getting into it a little bit. I have an Excel sheet that gets into the calculation of the effort super quickly. But again, don't get sucked into spending too much time on this. Literally go through it and just assign the number what you think it is. The really kind of cool part that I found when I was going through this, at the end, you have final say over the priority, right? Like this is a tool, not the law. If you are dealing with a boss, then you probably want to make sure that you are capturing what they think the effort is. And that's where the conversation needs to start. But for most of your projects, I would hope you would have say over how you're spending your time. And if not, then I would actually do this with your boss so that you guys are aligned from the get-go, so that you're not creating your own and then having the other person change it. So if you don't have a lot of control over what you think the impact and effort are, do it together. Have them help you prioritize. Okay, so when you've done kind of the intent in the day and you've done the planning according to kind of the effort and your importance or the impact, sometimes, you know, stuff happens, right? Allison, you said like you have a project that shows up, or you know, Karen, you mentioned that sometimes like somebody has a different view. You want to make sure that you're just taking a pause. Take a pause. These are not exhaustive quick hits by any stretch of the imagination. I just find that these are the ones that have helped me manage both myself as well as others. So I kind of go through saying yes selectively, make it easy to get started, take a break, visualize the progress, and then trade off. So these actually align to the poll questions that I had in the beginning, where some of you said that you just feel like you can't get all of it done. Some of you said that you lack motivation. Some of it is like distractions. And then, you know, others kind of said it's everything. So I tried to kind of get a little bit in there. And of course, as always, if you have something that you feel like is working for you, please share in the chat and then we can discuss. So I really love this visual when I saw it because it brings so many things into clarity. We often struggle with saying no. So what I'd like to reframe is actually saying yes to things that you can make a difference. When we have to feel like we're going to say no, it feels like an awkward thing to do, especially if we're helpers at the end of the day. And most of us like to help. Most of us like to fix things. So when you actually have something in front of you that you're like, oh, I can make a difference, we say yes. So what I've started doing is actually think about, am I the best person to be saying yes to? Like, am I the person that can make the difference? So is this within my control? If it's not, and is this something that I actually care about? If it's not, then again, I probably want to refocus on something else and say yes to something that I can impact and I can't control. Again, if you're talking about this in context of an organization and as a team, if somebody's delegated it to you and you don't have any control over who you then delegate it to further down the line, like the buck stops with you, you want to make sure that you're going back to that plan and the centralized task and strategy, and ask your boss if you are indeed the right person to be doing this. Because if it's going to take you really high effort, but it's going to take somebody else way more effort to do it, then it shouldn't land with you. So just think about that from a discussion topic. You may feel like it's out of your control and out of your choice, but I often like to start with communication and making sure that the other person actually understands the same thing you understand. Because sometimes our bosses, even though they have the best of intent, they may not be aware of the fact that it's going to take you way longer, or there's an element that somebody else has from a knowledge or technology or process wise that's going to take them way less time. So don't assume that they know that. And you can always just start from there in terms of conversation. Any comments? I don't know if there's anything coming from chats. If there are, please let me know. The second part that I feel like from a motivation perspective, like I definitely feel this on a daily basis, is there are some things that I just hate doing. And it is hard for me to get going. But once I get going, it actually is super easy to keep going. So we all have this problem of inertia, right? So I like this idea of just pressing play. Just do the bare minimum to get yourself going. Because honestly, once you overcome the bare minimum, you trick your mind into getting started, it actually will be way easier for you to keep going. So is for sure, I can attest to this, is the workout. I know once I've done it, that it's something that I love to do. So now I actually trick my brain to kind of go for a walk, and I don't even think that I'm going to go for 20 minutes. I'm just thinking of going down the street. So I'm aiming for 3 minutes. I'm aiming for just a little bit to get myself over the hump. Definitely eating healthier is another big challenge for me. So I honestly just start pre-packing stuff now where it's getting myself over the hump, so that when it comes time to make that choice, that I'm not making a decision in the heat of the moment. The decision's already made for me, or that the inertia piece has already been done for me. Any thoughts or comments or anything people would want to share just in terms of what's been working for them? Or for you, rather? There's lots of examples of this. I know because a lot of people have actually shared them with me. So yeah, just type them in the chat if you have something that you feel like is super helpful.
I'll say for me, it's having an accountability buddy.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's absolutely a great one. I find that when I actually claim my plans, when I state it, it's one that helps me a lot. This one I feel like everybody knows, but we don't do. So something to make yourself feel better about taking a break, because I hear this across everybody now, like work and family is just all bleeding into one another. So it's so easy for us to go from lunch right into work. It's really easy in the morning now, because we don't have that drive in, to go straight into work, and you're just working right up until lunch, and then you take a small break and then you go right back in. So I'm actually now consciously building in something that I leave unfinished. So it's as stupid as I was cleaning my oven last week, and I would just do a little bit at a time. And then every half an hour, I would actually go back and clean a little bit more. You know, even think back to what we were doing pre-COVID. There was already this mentality of, you know, have something that's completely different part of the brain. So coloring, doing a puzzle, something like that, where it taps into a different part of your brain. We are just in this world now where we have to consciously do that, because it's not built in anymore. There's no natural breaks in the day for us anymore. So if you used to have a commute, make sure that you're building that in. Make sure that it is something that is naturally mimicking the day that you used to have. So if you used to have a walk or something that you used to do, make sure you're still doing that. So it's really useful when you're moving from one activity to another to serve as transition. So if you used to always go out for lunch and you no longer have that ability to do that, make sure it's a physical break in the day. So whether you take it outside or you're moving to a different part of the room, separate it out so that it serves as both a physical as well as a mental break, if you're not doing that already. I found that I wasn't doing that because I just loved working out of the kitchen, but it was starting to make it way too easy to bleed into one another. And I started to build in these transition moments that is a physical as well as a mental break. So we don't do this well enough. We don't visualize our progress. So for those of us who are, you know, kind of losing motivation every so often, and every day just feels like a repeat of the previous day, make sure you're putting the thing that really matters to you, whether that's the intent of the day that you kind of set out by articulating the beginning of the day, or if it's your life purpose, if you know that, whatever that is for yourself. Make sure you're collecting these things and that it is actually visible for you. So for me, I really like actually having a folder in my email box that's all the thank yous and acknowledgement that people give me. Or it's a picture of what I want to aspire to and the people that I've helped. So if it's a story that I'm particularly really happy about, that somebody's been successful, I bookmark that digitally. So whether it's on a LinkedIn or whatnot, choose something that will tie back to what fuels you. It is a way for us to keep fueling ourselves. It's a way to make sure that we are remembering back to the things that we've done to make an impact. So it goes back to that second point of planning for impact versus effort. If you know that the things that you're trying to impact are actually coming out into fruition, make that visible. Keep a tally of, so for me, it is absolutely around the number of future leaders. So I keep a tally of all the people that I've, you know, kind of done workshops with, trained, taught, coached, mentored, whatever that number is. It all goes into this number of people that I've helped. It's extremely motivating for me to actually see that number go up, and then to actually have a visual acknowledgement if they have, you know, a thank you note or an email or just even feedback. It doesn't even have to be positive. It just can be feedback around like how the program can improve. For those of you who are fueled by family, collect images, especially through this COVID stage that we're in. I do screenshots of Zoom calls. I do kind of images of people sending out to each other. I know Innovation York, we started a campaign of kind of when we're apart, we're still together. So having these images to be really front and visible for yourself to keep the progress alive for you. We underestimate that again in terms of how our brain looks for validation, looks for fuel. So make sure that this is really kind of visible for yourself. I love this trade-off triangle. I learned this when I was really, really early into my corporate world. So when I first started as a kind of a junior marketer, one of the really wise vendors that I had actually came back because I said, you know, I want this to be done in a week I want you to cut money from it, and I want it to be high quality. And this person kind of came back to me and said, if you can find somebody who does that, you should go with them right now. So when you're feeling under the gun, note that there are trade-offs, and you can always go back and trade off one of the three. And if you can't, then you know you have to dedicate all your energy to this particular thing. But so for those of you who are part of a team and that you are trying to make sure that you're doing everything to its utmost best, know that it's really rare that all three have to be there at the exact same point. Create a bit of room for yourself. If you can, ask for more time. I feel like that's almost the easiest one to ask for sometimes. And if you know that that's not possible, then you need to trade off on one of the two. So either you need to get a little bit more money to get some help, or you need to get some resources. So money here is honestly resource. It can be in the form of asking for somebody to help you out, some expertise, some tools. So think of this money portion as resources. Or last but not least, maybe it doesn't have to be 100% the quality that you would want. Maybe give yourself some room and think about this as a version 1, so that you can start to trade off on not being a perfectionist from the get-go. So I find that this is a really great way to think about, there's always one of three that you can trade off. So don't hold yourself to such a high expectation all the time. I'm not saying that you never go here. Sometimes you will have projects that you just can't trade off on any of these. And then you know that this is the thing that you have to dedicate all your attention to. So luckily, most of us are not rocket scientists or neurosurgeons, and we have some room to play. So just remember, the next time that you feel like you're under the gun, you have choices. You have room to trade off. You have places to go. So I'm going to stop here again and see if anybody's got any comments, thoughts. Anybody who want to share like anything that's stressing you out right now that you're finding really hard to keep balance? We've got a bit of time. Okay, I'll keep going and then we'll open it up for questions and comments. I really love ending the day with gratitude. And I do find that gratitude is a practice. You do need to get into the habit of it, because although we do it, it's not consistent. And I definitely find myself not being consistent. But do find a few different ways to find the one that works for you, whether it's taking a moment out at the end of the day to acknowledge your intent, and replay back the highlight reel for your day. So this, I can tell you right now, this moment right now with you guys is going to go into my highlight reel. It might be an affirmation for yourself in terms of, hey, my intent of the day was this. I've done that piece. I've done the part that I wanted to do. One part that I really love, so this goes, props out to a friend of mine named Christine. She, through her positive psychology course, actually developed this format of a journal. Because those of you who've done gratitude, I feel like I hear this a lot is, yeah, but it gets really boring because you start acknowledging yourself for the same day. You're always grateful for your friends. You're always grateful for your family. So she actually started looking at something called GLAD. So use it for whatever applies for you. But she started acknowledging on something she was grateful for, but also something she's learned. Accomplished that it may be big or small. It doesn't have to be a huge accomplishment. For me, it might be just going out for a walk, because I don't get to do that every day. A delight could be something that you see that you don't typically see that brings a smile to your face. So a moment of pleasure. So it could be like the mochi ice cream that I had yesterday that I don't get to really have every single day, but kind of brought some joy into my life. So if that works for you, take this format or anything that could actually help you in that realm. So the next time you feel overwhelmed, remember, start with your intent. What do you want to get out of your day? And how do you want to control the tone of the day? And inevitably, yes, things will start coming in and kind of wreaking havoc with your plan. Make sure you have this process of starting to rejig your plan. So if something comes in, you have to go back into your plan and rebalance it. There are some quick hits that you can go to. So make sure you're saying yes selectively. Make sure you remember the trade-off, and with gratitude. So we have a few minutes at the end. I just want to open up the floor for you guys. Please feel free to check out any of the social media, my website, email me if you have any questions. Feel free to link me in. But I'll stop here and see if anybody's got questions, comments, concerns.
Karen comments here. She said, like, I find it's hard to choose what to prioritize. I have an extreme personality, all or nothing, and it's hard to let go of.
Mm-hmm. Karen, I feel you. I feel like you want to make sure that you are going with the mindset of it's about learning. So if your intent in the day is about learning, you could start to shift your mindset in terms of, I've got to do all or nothing. It's either I do it perfectly or I don't do it at all. So try that out for a couple of days and see if that will start to shift your way of approach. And start small, right? Remember when I said just press play? Start small. Start with something that is very low in terms of priority for you, that is doesn't have as much tied into it. So that is one where I would play around a little bit, where you want to just experiment and let yourself get into the act of not having to be extreme about it. But I get you. I am the exact same way. It took me a long time to profess that I'm a perfectionist, because I actually never thought I was. And then I realized that my perfectionism came out in the way of procrastination. So I would hold off doing things until the very last minute because I didn't want to get it wrong. I find COVID actually has been a really great release to be this. So I actually found myself saying things like, well, what's the worst that can happen? I'll put it out there and it doesn't work. Then I won't do it again. Or I'll learn something and I'll do it again, but differently. So consider that. There's a couple of different ways to do it. So Allison, I'm just seeing your comment now. Give yourself a set time. Oh, I love that. Yes. Thank you for raising that. I actually didn't get it into my quick hits. But yes, I do that a lot. I put a timer on stuff that I hate to do, or that I find that I'm just going to go into the extremes and it kind of just go into no man's land. Set a timer. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no problem, Karen. That's a really great comment. I think a lot of people can relate to that. But for sure, start with something small. It is a really scary thing if you're a perfectionist and you like to do it all or nothing. I do find that that's very super scary. Anybody else? I'm sure I've missed a ton. I try to fit everything into kind of 40 minutes or less. Is there anything that I haven't covered that people are kind of wondering about? Free open ground for that. You can text me privately if you want. I can now start to see it.
Judy, any thoughts on tools like Trello, Asana? I think there's two sides. There are people that live and die by it, and there are folks that just can't make it work.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't really go down that path. I think it is really super personal. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of Trello. I find that for me personally, I don't like different boards. I like to see it all in one. So if you're very visual and you like to see everything combined in one, you may want to consider something else that allow you to do that. I'm super basic. I use a planner and I have a calendar. I've always loved seeing everything all in one. So just know your own preference. Some people love Trello because they have that satisfaction of moving it across to a different part that's completed. So if you're if you get fueled by that, for sure, experiment and try that out. Yeah, Ruth, absolutely. I think this is being recorded. I think all the sessions are located on YouTube, Nafis?
Yes.
So maybe we can just post a link in the chat. But if you forget, go back to the YSpace website and you can always find those different things. So at the last stage, I always love to do this is if you guys wouldn't mind giving me a sense of what your biggest kind of takeaway was and what's going to stay with you to move forward. So if you go into, I think you guys can just do text, put in your own comments here. So I don't know who's writing what. You can be super candid on this. You can go have fun with it, draw some pictures. But I would love just for me to know what's been useful and what you're going to be able to kind of apply to the next 7 days.
And by the way, Judy, thank you. I went to your website and I noticed that you have that time planner available on your site.
Yeah. Feel free to download it. I also have for I teach at Seneca. So I have a decision matrix for people who have trouble making decisions. It's kind of a great way for people who are very numbers focused. So yeah, if you have any questions, just reach out and feel free to send me a question. I've got somebody saying visual cues. It's great. Breaking down tasks that are 4 hours or more, adding a deadline for a timer. Yeah, perfect. There's a breakout project and tasks again. For sure, yes. So Darren, you said, kind of the key thing that you're taking away is making sure you're revisiting breaking out projects. I find that that is the biggest one that when you are starting to project manage is making sure that you're actually including the milestones backing your tasks, because then you can actually start to decide where they go in that quad. So assigning time to tasks for team. Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that you're building in the time required. Thanks, Rania, for noting that starting with intent. I find for me, starting with intent and ending with gratitude makes a huge difference for motivation. So I have a lot more information from a motivational perspective. If you guys are interested, send me a note. I'll add you to, I'm going to start kind of sending out updates to people who are signing up. But for me, it goes back into kind of intrinsic and extrinsic motivators. Didn't really have time to get into that today, but I listed for the intent. Those are actually the intrinsic motivators. So I built it in without getting too much into it, but you want to make sure that you have a balance of those two. Those of us who are motivated by external things like money, status, power, super motivating and really does work. However, if you want it to be sustainable, you want to start shifting those into intrinsic ones. And those are more things like learning, connecting, kind of achievement. So those are more self-worth type things. Yeah, thank you, Allison. Have a great day, but thanks for spending this time with us. Anybody else have any questions or comments or things I missed, things that you wish I covered? Okay, amazing. Well, with that, I thank you.